A House with a History. A House with a History, New York. Charles S. Hamilton and Co., Printers, 61, Cedar Street, NY 1882. A House with a History. Call Roger Morris Fine Old Mansion. The biography of one of the oldest residences on Manhattan Island, forfeited to the state, a source of profit to the Astors, and still standing to tell its story. It is a treat to see a house occasionally that is a little different from its neighbors. One that has not a brownstone front and high brownstone steps, and a brownstone railing, and a brownstone area, and the face of a brownstone servant girl looking out of the basement window. There are a few houses in New York that were not cast in this mold, but very few, and whenever we see one it is a relief to the eyes to stop and look at it. If it happens to be a very old house, with one or two walls a little out of plumb and big dormer windows on the roof, so much the better, for then it brings a suggestion of big, airy rooms and other luxuries our ancestors enjoyed before what we call the modern conveniences were invented. These modern conveniences consist, in very large part, of rooms a trifle larger than lockboxes in the post office, entries whose narrowness is equaled only by their shortness, and 5 or 6 families trying to live in the space that would comfortably hold one. We see so few fine old-fashioned places in New York that we are more likely than most people to appreciate one when we do find it. The old homes of nearly all the wealthy old families have gone to the dogs. Some have been torn down, some have been changed into apartment houses, some are business places. There is hardly one left just as it stood half a century ago. The thing we are most accustomed to is the flimsy house that was put up yesterday, and that will be pulled down tomorrow to make room for a larger. In this uncomfortable and unsettled state of affairs he is a benefactor who discovers a real stately old mansion, standing today just as it stood nearly a century ago, inside and out, with no changes but those made by old time. So much the better if the mansion is one known to history, and if its broad rooms have sheltered men whose names we venerate. There is at least one such mansion still standing in New York, standing now just as it stood in the days we read about in history, filled up to the very throat with furniture of the last century, that loses nothing by comparison with our own, overflowing with bric-a-brac, the walls hidden with paintings. Better than all, still occupied by the same family that owned it when Canal Street was a very good street, but rather too far uptown. If celebrity had the same bad effect upon houses that it has upon some men, this rare old house would stretch itself up several feet higher and refuse to have anything to do with its neighbors. But it does not. It is as modest as it is grand and stately, as kindly and inviting as some fine old gentleman with cutaway coat and gray locks, so secure in its social position that it does not need to humiliate everything around it to make its own greatness felt. It is a house with a history. No story of the Revolution is complete without a mention of it. When New York was not much more than a big town, it stood just where it stands now. George Washington once lived in it, in those stormy times, and laid his plans of battle. Many men whose names are part of the history of the Republic have eaten in its big dining room, danced on its smooth parlor floor, and slept in its airy chambers. In its drawing room 100 Indians have stood, dressed in all the wild grandeur of their native costume, and consulted with the great chief of the Palefaces. Then when the war was over, and the cannon were left out in the fields to rust, the fine old house became a place of public entertainment. The man who started the first line of stages from New York to Boston turned it into a hotel, and advertised that the octagon room in which the Indians had assembled was very happily calculated for a turtle party. Confiscated by the government, the old house, by a wonderful combination of circumstances, had a good deal to do with getting together the nucleus of the great Astor fortune. Then it went into the hands of a wealthy French merchant, who brightened up its rusty parts and made it once more a fine private residence. This merchant took a ship over to France, loaded it down with fine furniture and paintings, with young trees, and with everything he could buy, to ornament his house and grounds. Some of the furniture came out of French palaces, and is quite as grand and costly as the finest that can be bought at the present day. This furniture still stands in the big parlor and drawing room, these pictures still hang upon the walls, and these trees are still growing in the spacious grounds. The house stands on the summit of Harlem Heights. For many years it was known as the Roger Morris House, but it is more familiar to us as the Jumo Mansion. The grounds about this grand old place are full of fruit trees, and when the writer first visited them, one warm day in spring, they were all in blossom. They looked like so many great snowballs, and smelled like vast bunches of violets. By the side of the house some of Madame Jumel's descendants were amusing themselves with archery. Where the apple blossoms and the new green leaves did not hide everything from sight, there were delightful views. New York City lies at the foot of this hill, the Harlem River flows beside it, not far away is the Sound, and Brooklyn can be seen, and some of the Long Island towns. But however grand the view may be, it is not the view that is the chief attraction of the place. It is easy to imagine on these bright spring days a warm spring afternoon, and the crowded people in the city jostling each other in their efforts to reach fresh air and sunshine and quiet. Out of this hubbub, out from the shadows of high brick walls, out of the crush and bustle and busy racket of the city, to walk suddenly into this yard of some acres extent, with apple blossoms and blue sky overhead, with soft green grass underfoot, with not a sound to be heard except the laughter of the archers on the lawn, with nobody to crowd you, nobody to disturb you, the delightful spring perfume to soothe you, is about as near fairyland as anything to be found on Manhattan Island. With all this luxury outside, it takes a pretty good interior not to be disappointing. But there is nothing disappointing there. The house is one of those broad, two-story buildings that used to be fashionable, but now take up too much room to be profitable. It is built of wood, and painted white. Nobody who has ever visited the upper part of the city, on the west side, can fail to have seen it. It stands on the top of a high hill and can be seen for miles. Go up the west side elevated railroad to the last station, and, when you leave the platform, look to the northwest, and it is the highest, largest, most prominent house you see. It has a slanting roof, with dormer windows, and a flat space on top, around which is a substantial railing. From this place on top of the house there is hardly any prominent object on Manhattan Island that cannot be seen. At the front is a large portico, about half the width of the house. The roof of this portico covers both the first and second stories, and is supported by 4 tall pillars. The casing of the front door is handsomely carved and embellished, and immediately over it, at the second story, is another door, instead of a window, that opens upon a balcony. In the rear is an octagonal wing, the lower story of which is the drawing room. The whole place is as quiet as if it stood on the summit of the Adirondacks, though it is only 5 minutes' walk from an elevated railroad station. Entering by the broad front door, the visitor is in a spacious hall filled with curious and useful articles, its walls covered with old paintings. There, on the left, hangs a life-size portrait of Madame Jumel, a little girl standing by her side. There are many other family portraits, all done by the foremost artists of that time. Here, on the right, near the door, is a tiny table, its top handsomely inlaid. On this little stand a celebrated but unorthodox writer wrote the best known of all his books. Above the arch, at the rear of the hall, is something that looks like the American coat of arms, and yet does not look like it. It is all complete, with the exception of the eagle. It was bought in Paris, when it was not safe to parade an eagle over one's door-tops. So the eagle was taken out, and the remainder of the ornament, with some little device substituted, was put where it still remains. To the left, on entering the hallway, is the door leading to the parlor. This is a large room, handsomely furnished, and the walls are ornamented with the works of some of the old masters. The furniture is of mahogany, and the carpet still in a good state of preservation, though it has lain so many years, and been trod by several generations. Everything in this room is in the style of half a century or more ago, except a few paintings that have been added. They have a more modern appearance, for the style of paintings changes, as well as other styles. At the end of the corridor a folding door opens into the drawing room, which is on the first floor of the octagon extension. Here, too, is all the old furniture just as it stood many years ago, including a number of articles that people of the present generation would hardly know the use of. The chairs and sofas, all brought from Paris, are upholstered in delicate light satin, and, with their mahogany frames, are almost as good now as when they were first made. At several points little plaster angels hang from the ceiling, supported by invisible wires. It was in this room that Washington held a consultation with the Indian chiefs. It is safe to suppose that he felt relieved when he bowed the last one out and locked the door, for they were none too friendly. They entered the house without any invitation, so the story goes, and it was at first thought that their intentions were hostile. But they said they only wanted to have a talk with the great chief. The dining room of this Morris or Jumel mansion is one of its most attractive parts. Indeed, the dining room of any house is an attractive place to a man with a well-regulated interior, but this one is particularly interesting. It is a room that would set a collector of bric-a-brac and rare china wild with delight. A very large room, it has windows on two sides, the front and the east. It is on the right-hand side of the hallway upon entering the house. The back end of the room is entirely taken up with a great old-fashioned mahogany sideboard almost big enough for a modern house. There is no newfangled Frenchified buffet about that, it is a genuine old-time sideboard, every inch of it. And every bit of its top and every one of its many shelves is loaded down with rare pieces of plate, tall silver ornaments, and scores of pieces of decorated chinaware. Many of these choice bits have a history. Not a few of them are, in one way or another, connected with distinguished men, and could tell interesting stories if they could be induced to talk. One side of the dining room, the side nearest the entry, is filled by a mahogany stand, made up of half a dozen or more shelves. And every one of these shelves is as full as it can hold with pretty pieces of plate and china, all old and rare. The big mahogany dining table, in the center of the room, is both broad and long. It may be that the present mistress of the establishment, who, with great kindness, pointed out the historical treasures of the place to the writer, will not thank him for giving to the public a minute description of her household arrangements, but pretty things certainly ought to be admired, and many people who cannot look at this rare old house with their own eyes may take pleasure in looking at it through somebody else's. This mansion stands on some of the highest ground on Manhattan Island. It is not far from the Hudson, but that river is not visible on account of the intervening high land. The Harlem River, however, may be seen from any part of the grounds, almost its entire length, from above High Bridge, down below Randall's Island. Roger Morris, the original owner of the house, was a younger son of Charles Morris, of Wandsworth, England, and was born in 1727. He became prominent in America in 1764 as an aide on the staff of General Braddock, and was wounded in the attack upon Fort Duquesne. He was an intimate acquaintance of George Washington before the Revolution. He married Mary Phillips, a sister of Mrs. Beverly Robinson, an heiress, in her own right, of 50,000 acres of land. The wedding was celebrated at the Phillipsburg Manor House, in March, 1758. In 1764 he settled in this historic house, which was then near New York. Washington made this house his headquarters during the active campaign on the upper part of Manhattan Island. After the enemy had taken possession of the first American line, a historian writes, things remained quiet for an hour or two. In this interval, General Washington, with Gens. Greene, Putnam, Mercer, and other principal officers, came over the North River from Fort Lee, and crossed the island to the Morris House, whence they viewed the position of our troops and the operations of the enemy in that quarter. The British troops soon afterward took possession of the very spot on which Washington and his officers had stood. Some accounts say that they had not been gone more than 15 minutes. Washington's last visit to this house, during the war, was on the 16th of September, 1776. He visited it under more pleasant and peaceful circumstances several years later. When the capture of Fort Washington resulted in the whole island falling into the hands of the British, the Hessians encamped on Harlem Heights, and General Knyphausen, their commander, used the Morris House as his headquarters, and it continued to be so used by the Hessians and the British till the day of the evacuation of the island, November 25, 1783. Notwithstanding its long occupation by the military, it was still considered a desirable residence. For a short time after the Revolution it was occupied by Dr. Isaac Ledyard. In June, 1785, Talmadge Hall, who had just started a line of stages from New York to Boston, starting from the Old City Tavern, at Broadway and Thames Street, leased the building and opened it as a hotel, making it the first stopping place on his line, and inviting parties from the city to visit it. The Act of Attainder, passed by the New York legislature in 1779, included, among those named, Colonel Robert Morris and his wife. When the British evacuated this city, Colonel Morris and his wife went to England, where they spent the remainder of their lives. Colonel Morris died on the 13th of September, 1794, at the age of 67 years, and his wife survived him many years, living till July, 1825, when she was 96 years old. It was not till after her death that the old question of the Attainder Act, and its effect upon her heirs, came up. It was claimed, on the part of the heirs, that there had been a secret antenuptial settlement, which could not be affected by the Act of Attainder. John Jacob Astor bought the claims of the heirs, and it is said that he made $500,000 by the speculation. Colonel Morris's plate and furniture had been sold long before this, in 1793, in this city, under the direction of the Commissioners of Forfeiture. As a reward for his loyalty to the Crown, Colonel Morris received compensation from the British government for all his losses. When General Washington visited New York, in 1790, after his election to the presidency, he once more visited the old Morris house, and made this entry in his diary, under date of Saturday, July 10, having formed a party, consisting of the Vice President, his lady and son and Miss Smith, the Secretaries of State, Treasury, and War, and the ladies of the two latter, with all the gentlemen of my family, Mrs. Lear, and the two children, we visited the old position of Fort Washington, and afterward dined on a dinner provided by Mr. Mariner, at the house lately of Colonel Roger Morris, but confiscated, and in the occupation of a common farmer. After going through several hands, the house was sold to Stephen Jumel, who, at his death, left it to his widow, Madame Jumel, and her descendants still live on the property. After Stephen Jumel's death, Madame Jumel married Aaron Burr. Burr thus became interested in an estate that lay hardly more than a gunshot away from Hamilton Grange, the country seat of Hamilton. In 1834, the oldest living son of Hamilton, by a conveyance made to him in 1834, by Madame Jumel, in which she is described as Eliza B. Burr, wife of Aaron Burr, became interested in the property on which Burr and his wife then resided, and by a subsequent deed, conveyed it to a trustee for her benefit for life, and upon her death to go to her niece and adopted daughter, Mary, afterwards the wife of Nelson Chase. Upon her death, in 1865, there began a series of the most remarkable lawsuits in legal annals, to obtain possession of the property from the children of her niece, Mary, who were then in possession of the property. After a period of about 15 years, and the expenditure of upwards of $300,000 in legal expenses, the claimants were defeated and the title firmly established. In 1880 a partition suit was brought, in which all the persons having any interest, or claiming any interest, were made parties. By consent of all the parties, judgment was rendered by the Supreme Court, in June, 1881, directing a sale at public auction, and distribution of the proceeds. By virtue of the judgment of the Supreme Court, rendered on the 6th day of June, 1881, in the action of partition brought by William Inglis Chase against Nelson Chase and others, all the property of the estate unsold, consisting of the mansion, together with the tract of land surrounding it, containing 783 city lots, and lying between 159th Street, St. Nicholas Avenue, Kingsbridge Road, 175th Street, High Bridge Park, and Croton Aqueduct, also, the upland east of the aqueduct, north of 159th Street, and water lots having a front along the Harlem River of about 4,000 feet, containing about 400 city lots, together with the preemptive right to the land under water, in front thereof, extending out to the new Bulkhead Line, or River Street, containing about the same area, and also premises numbers 150 Broadway, 71 and 73, Liberty Street, will be sold at public auction at the Merchants Exchange Sales Room, number 111 Broadway, New York, on the 31st day of May, 1882, at 12 o'clock, and continued on each succeeding day until all the property is sold. Philo T. Ruggles, Referee, 59, Liberty Street. Roe and Macklin, Plaintiffs' Attorneys, 156 and 158 Broadway, New York. Transcribers note minor punctuation errors have been changed without notice. Hyphenation was standardized. Spelling was retained as in the original. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. A House with a History. Updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.1 through 1.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.8 or 1.9. 1.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.1 through 1.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg. 1.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg license. 1.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg license as specified in paragraph 1.1. 1.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg works unless you comply with paragraph 1.8 or 1.9. 1.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about Donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg works. 1.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f 1.f.1 Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty. Disclaimer of damages except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs, and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you ASIS, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion, and distribution of Project Gutenberg electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs, and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg work, and C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a nonprofit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN or Federal Tax Identification Number is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116-801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.